had made changes to their platform and went down. She started testing on backlinks, and backlinks have gone down. So we think anything that she touches no longer is a factor or usable. Honey is negative SEO.
There's the dream team.
The dream team. Most people have bad dreams like this. The nightmare.
No way.
Well, I mean, Ted and I are good people, but some people are very black hat. Very, very black hat.
Be careful, I will start pointing fingers.
There's the legendary Dre Vera.
What's
Hey,
up?
hey!
Hello.
Is he going to do the production for this show? Because this show could use some
That
production out of you.
That buttery soft voice.
All right.
I always get that comment in like my meetings at work. They're like, "Oh my God, am I on a show?" It's a regular meeting.
Yeah, it's the personality. The personality.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late getting stuff set up, but thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. I'm not sure that Kyle will be joining us today. I know he's been having some health issues, so he's probably taken a little time off. Clint may show up a bit later. We'll see. But we still have a great show. But, they may, both Clint and Kyle may pop in at some point. We'll just have to wait and see how they're doing. So with that, we'll just dive right in. And can you guys see my slides okay? Perfect. All right, so today we're going to be looking at ranking probabilities. At the Ask Ted Anything meeting, we went down a rabbit hole of talking about the latest update and what might be going on with it, and it all came down to volatility. And then people said, hey, if it's all coming down to volatility, let's look at that tool you made and let's run some keywords. That meeting was only an hour, so I couldn't run the reports for everybody's keywords who was in that meeting. So I took a list and we ran all those reports. And now we're going to go and see if there's anything to learn from the ranking probabilities for all those keywords. So before that, though, we normally like to talk about the SEO This Week show, but we don't have Clint to do that. So hopefully Clint can fill us in later on that. I did see that we have Dre Vera, and we haven't had a check-in from Dre in a while. So Dre, what is going on with your show? What have we missed since you were last on?
Well, it's been picking up a lot of traction. I've been getting a lot of good comments on the guests. I mean, the production quality's been getting better every week. I'm a big tech guy, so I just buy the latest toys and just add it to the show like every week, and it's pretty fun. I mean, it's all for the love of SEO. I give away free things. I give away whether it's shirts, memberships, anything like that. Just come on and say I love SEO, and I'll pick you next week or this coming Friday.
Very cool. If you haven't seen Dre's show, it's an interview show where he gets like the industry's most well-known personalities. Somehow he gets them to come on his show and tell their story and spill their secrets. What is the magic to your ability to network, Trey? How do you do that? Why is it so hard for the rest of us? And what can we do to break out of that shell?
I swear, it's just a smile and just asking.
That's your recipe.
Just smile and ask, and it'll get through to them, and they'll respond. And like I did mention before, like if you don't get a response, shoot them a quick video with yourself just talking, and it's more personable, and they will respond to that. I swear, from someone that won't respond to an email, maybe for days, when I send them a video, I'll get response within hours.
So if you're doing outreach in general, like if you're trying to ask someone for a backlink, does the same technique apply?
I think so. I'm curious. I wonder if other people that do backlinks would actually ask on video. I mean, can you imagine how personal that would be? Like, hey, you know what? I see you have a great website, and can I do a guest post on there? And we can work something out.
Well, it definitely differentiates you from like the spam and the auto mailers and the campaign mailers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart. So to find your show, all people have to do is go to YouTube and search for the SEO video show, and it'll be the first result. And I highly recommend you go and check it out. It's a labor of love. We don't make money in SEO shows. We will never have the view count that actually makes ad revenue above $100 a month. So that's like the glass ceiling for SEO YouTube shows. So we do it out of our love of the topic and the industry and the community, and we live or die based on people just saying, hey, I like what you're doing. So please subscribe and let us know. So Lauren, what's coming up with IMG?
Yeah, so if you haven't heard, there's a new chance to get an SEO IMG SEO Science t-shirt, and that's if you send us a testimonial as a community member. And tomorrow we have the SEO Mastermind test review. So that is led by Lee, who's on the show, and he is always dropping bombs. So if you can, join that. And then Friday we have a pro tip, and our next AMA is with Kyle Roof, and that's a Tuesday evening pro tip for most people in the US.
Thank you. Yeah, Kyle and I kind of have this like quiet rivalry to see who can have the most awesome AMAs. And I think the last 3 I've been killing it. So, I'm excited to see what Kyle brings to the table when he does his. So
Yeah.
We'll have to see. It's kind of like a stealthy, never talked about competition of just delivering the value. So I look forward to seeing Kyle's AMA. Yeah, that's awesome about the t-shirts, because it's so hard to get those t-shirts. It took me months to get one, and I'm an insider. And so yeah, these are rare items indeed. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's participating in that program. It really helps us out a lot when community members hear from other community members what they get out of something. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so back to our topic. Ranking probabilities again. We've talked about this in the past. I will briefly explain what this is, and then we're going to dive into some reports. So we have 14 reports to go over. We may or may not get to all of them. So I put all of the reports in a Google Drive, and if you are interested in downloading one or multiple of these, feel free. If this is your keyword, go grab your report. If you have difficulty reading it, you can zoom in on your own computer, much larger than probably what you can do with YouTube. So it's at that URL. And so I'll just babble here an extra moment or two in case somebody's trying to type it, so I don't just zap it off the screen for you. But don't feel obligated. You don't need to go there. You can always go after the show, rewind and pull it, because we're going to go over it on the show too. But these are the keywords that the people that were at the last IMG Ask Ted Anything wanted reports for. So these were their keywords. I let them know that we're talking about them publicly, so we're not outing anybody's niche. They all knew it was going to be on the show. So ranking probabilities. What these are is we're measuring rankings for a keyword 20 times as fast as we possibly can. And then we look at the variance in those rankings for that keyword, and we try to explain the odds for what somebody else might see when they try to look for the specific URL and keyword combination. So imagine if there was a way to go to Las Vegas and gamble, and I'm going to bet $20 on what Lee is going to see when he searches for Carolyn's keyword and URL. See in Google. So how do you describe those odds? How do you place the best odds bet on what Carolyn or what Lee is going to see for Carolyn's keyword and URL? And so that's what we're trying to do, because we don't view rankings as just a scalar value. You don't say I rank 14. There's a problem with that, because your client comes in and goes, no, I don't. I rank 28. Even though you know that a moment ago you just checked and it was 14. Something's going on there, but it's not a static value. It's not a fact on the ground. It's actually a probability, and lots of things can factor into it. So the way we graph these, this is actually a bar chart. These bars have different heights, and the bars are at their rank position in Google. So this particular example was ranking 65 at its best, 80th at its worst, but it only, see how short that bar is? It only ranks 65 a little bit of the time. The most common ranking is typically the highest one. It's often at the middle. So when we're looking for, is there position testing upward, position testing downward, the most common ranking will always be at the middle of that color divide. And so we can see that this one has a lot of heavy downward position testing. That bar is almost as high as the most common ranking. And so when we try to describe the probability of what somebody's going to see based on this ranking data, these are the 20 individual rank checks we got in under a minute. You can see there's a lot of variation there. We have this basic way of describing the odds bet. We were, the purple part, we were in 100% of the searches. 35% of the time we were number 72, which is this green block, is the most frequently occurring ranking. And the worst case was 80. So in this, what the whole SEO industry doesn't know is that there are 4 ways to improve your rankings, 4 different ways to make your ranking better. And people don't know that when you just say, you know, I rank 24. You're unaware of the 4 different ways to improve your ranking. So the first one is, well, you could rank, you could appear in less than 100% of searches. You might only appear in 10% of searches. And if you can increase that percentage to appear every time you search somewhere in the results, that's one dimension of improvement. And then right now, this ranking, this example is only number 72, 35% of the time. If we made that 60% of the time, that would be great, because that would have to take away from that 80 that we don't like, that downward testing. So if we could appear at our most common ranking more of the time, that is better. And then we could actually improve our most common ranking. If that became 24 instead of 72, that would be fantastic. That's another way to improve this ranking. And then what people have never even explored before is improving your worst case. If we made our worst case 73, that's much better than a worst case of 80. So you could bring up the bottom. And so there are these 4 dimensions that you could do something on your web page that would improve, any one or multiple of those 4 values and make your ranking stronger. And what we've found when we've started looking at ranking probabilities is that not all rankings are equivalent. So if you have 2 URLs for keywords, they're both ranking number 4 for their keyword. One of those might be a very weak number 4. Like, it's easy to knock them out. They're having lots of stability issues with their ranking. The other one might be a very solid, strong number 4. And so what we're seeing in this data is that not all number 4 rankings are the same. And so it's important to know, especially if you're number 5, it's very important to know, is that number 4 ahead of you a weak number 4? Or is it a strong number 4? Because it's going to tell you how much work you have ahead of you to displace them. And so when we see the color bands, the green and the red, we call this position testing, because we typically rank here at 72, but Google is saying, well, let's try it out once or twice at 65 and see if we like, the public response to it better. But actually, they're testing it way down at 80 more than they're testing it up. And that's a problem. So if that's my web page, I don't like it being tested a lot down at 80. I don't like that at all. That's the wrong way. So this is position testing. Another thing we see is time sharing. So we searched 20 times, but the website only appeared in 3 of those 20. So that's over here. Instead of it being in 100% of searches, it was in 15% of searches. And typically what happens with time sharing is somebody else has your spot. So when you're out, someone else is in. And we think Google does this because the primary index is a very finite and limited resource. So if you take a keyword like Google, there are an estimated 10 billion documents on the web that reference Google. But Google's own search engine will only display about 80 of them in the primary index. 80 out of 10 billion documents that mention Google are findable in Google. That's remarkable. Most of the documents that mention Google, you would have an extremely hard time finding with Google. And so we think that when Google finds a document that might be worthy to be in the 80 they show, they test it out. So they take a document from outside the primary index and they take one of the ones that they have allocation for out and they put it in for a while. They A/B test and see how it does. And we think that's the mechanism by which content from outside the primary index can be included into search. And so that's time sharing. And when you see that your competitor is time sharing, that's the worst signal. That's way worse than position testing. And that's horrible. You want to fix that if that's your result. And I don't want to go that far back. What I want to do is switch over to a report. So those charts that you are seeing, I pulled them for the top 100 results all at the same time. So when I run a report, I pull the top 100 results 20 times as fast as I can in a minute. And I create those charts. I present those odds for every URL in the top 100 for each keyword. And so this chart represents rankings from 1 to 100. So 1 is way over here, 100 will be way over there. And you start to see the color breaking out, little bit of variance. And then we generally see the variance get larger as we go down. And so down here at the bottom, there's a lot of downward position testing. Google's not liking a lot of what it has there in the bottom portion of the top 100. Very infrequent upward testing for this keyword. This particular keyword is best SEO software. And I ran this because I was running an experiment on my own website. A lot of people know I've been experimenting with developing an edge SEO technology. And so I used that edge SEO technology on my website. And my website, it's right there at number 50. It's got no business ranking for this keyword. I have no content about best SEO software, but all of a sudden I'm ranking 50 for it, even though there's no content about best SEO software on my page. So that's the interesting thing about Edge SEO solutions, is that I could instantly get a page without content to rank for a keyword, and that was pretty cool. Of course, I didn't let that last very long, so I turned it off and I pulled the rankings again. I dropped to 100. Why? Because my page isn't about the keyword. So it's a cool experiment. I saw the powerful effect of Edge SEO and being able to do a takeaway on the SEO. No, taking my SEO back. I'm taking my ball and leaving the table. So that technology has that weird effect of, if you want to, you can take your SEO and leave. And that's what happened. When I took my SEO remotely off the page plummeted. So it was interesting to see that effect happen. But what we see in these charts, see how there's no real variance up here at the top. There's no color. I mean, we got all the numbers here, but they're all the same number. Number 1 is all 1s. Number 2 is all 2s. Google has chosen for this keyword. It said, I really like this number 1. He's just going to be number 1, period. Google's made a call, has decided who's going to be at these top rankings. And for this keyword, I mean, it's very little variation, all the way down into page 5. It's not until page 6, page 7, where it starts to open up. So if I was doing like old school average SEO, like looking at this data, I would say, well, I can get you to like page 6, but then it's going to start to be, really quite tricky. After that, it's going to be fierce SEO competition, because these people are kind of locked into their spots. It's going to be a fight to make them move. So if we look at the next one, this is the keyword is Google, because somebody wanted to, say, hey, well, if there's only 80 results, and when we checked, yeah, there's only 80 results for Google. Is there a lot of volatility in those 80? Well, yeah, more for best SEO software, more than the last keyword. And so we see right away that there's volatility creeping in. So there's not a big allocation of URLs for that keyword. The most we see currently for allocation is 600. So there would be 600 documents that you could find for a keyword in Google, and then Google won't show you anymore. You have to use special search modifiers to dig deeper, but nobody does that. So for this keyword, there's only 80. So it's 600 or less, and usually it's even 300 or less for most keywords. And for Google as a keyword, the allocation in the primary index is 80 pages for the keyword Google.
Ted, one of the things that I find it's interesting about this particular one is how much time sharing there is. If you look over to the right on the rankings, you'll see like there at 5, that's, there's 4 times that it appears, and then it's, gone, and 3 at 16, 3 at 21, and it gets worse the further down the page you go.
Yeah. I mean, look at all this time sharing. So yeah, these Google only has a small allocation, and it's testing a lot of pages outside of that allocation. But keep in mind, there are 10 billion pages that mention Google, and Google's only going to show 80 of them in search. So they're going to have to test a lot all the time. And it's interesting how much upward position testing they have with what they're currently showing. I think that's really interesting. All right, let's look at the next one.
Looks like a disproportionate amount of books.google.com.
Yeah, a lot of their books pages and a lot of properties that Google owns in there. There are a few outside of Google, press about Google, stuff like that. But yeah, there's not a lot of property diversity in those results. So when I was in online retail, the white whale keyword I had was yoga pants. It's the one keyword I could never break into. No matter how hard I try, I always failed on this keyword. And, a long time ago, I used to, judge SEOs by, how big of a search volume keyword can they rank for. And I've stopped doing that. I now judge SEOs based on the keyword they're unable to rank for, because it tells me more about the limit of their skills and the degree of competition they can go up against regularly and be successful. So yoga pants is a keyword I failed on. I tried really hard and failed. And I've had other people try to rank for it and to show me that I'm, a bad SEO, but nobody's been able to break into it easily. They all typically underestimate how difficult this keyword is. And it's difficult for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of online retailers, and there's a lot of very large publications that talk about yoga pants. It's a hot topic. So you're basically competing against Fortune 1000 brands, just trying to even get into the top 100. And so a fly-by-night, blogger page isn't going to do it. And again, we see that page 1 is all locked in. Google's made its choices for page 1. Page 2, you start to see some testing. And this one is awesome. I would feel great if I was ranking 57 and saw Google doing a lot of upward position testing to number 20, that's fantastic. So whatever is happening here, it might be worthy of going to look at that page and maybe using Wayback Machine, try to figure out what it was they were changing to get this type of leap forward. So there's a competitive aspect here where you can say, oh crap, this guy's making moves. You know, if I'm number 32, I should maybe be worried about this guy pushing me down a spot. You know, so you could actually use this data to find, you know, who's trying to make a move on you. And so it was interesting to see that there's, you know, quite a bit of variation going on here too. Not as much time sharing. There is some, but it's less common here than it was with the Google. Sorry, I have to move the browser to see the tabs because of all the streaming UI. So here, the next keyword is gut health. And check this out. They are all locked in. We're down to page 3 of the search results, and there's not even variance. Google has chosen for these spots. And then below that, here we are in, you know, mid-page 4, we start to see some variations. A lot of red, though, a lot of downward testing. Here's another good one to keep an eye on. This guy is predominantly 62, but being tested at 50. It's another one to look at. And then a lot of downward testing in the bottom part of the top 100. All right, so this keyword is an executive search. And wow, right off the bat, ton of time sharing going on here. Google does not feel good about the documents it is working with. So it's testing from outside to try to find something that performs better or looks better or something. Who knows what's happening here, but Google is swapping things out quite a bit. And another interesting thing about this one is the only one that's like, you know, really locked in is Wikipedia. So if you want to rank well for this keyword, I guess you want to be more like the Wikipedia article for it, because it's the only one that's like in there and solid. And just a ton of red. And look at this one. Predominantly 13, but testing down to, what is that, 66. And that's remarkable. Yeah, 40 down to 98. And you got some interesting ones, though. You got a 98 testing up to 30. But, I mean, those are some wild swings. So I'm guessing, you know, despite the fact that it's a short tail keyword like executive search, you know, there may be some opportunities to figure out how to get past these weak rankings. And there's a lot of weak rankings here. All right, so next one is Best Barber, Colorado Springs. It looks like the first half of page 1 is locked in. Serious competition there. But then we start to see, you know, surprisingly, a lot of green. And, you know, I have theories about when I see a lot of green versus a lot of red. When I think what might be happening, and I don't know for certain, but I think what might be happening is when there's a lot of green, Google has, generally a high percentage of allocation to documents available. And so it's basically just trying to figure out which ones perform the best. So there tends to be a lot of upward testing to see, does this perform better than that? The next keyword is BMW specialist, Worcester, UK. And page one looks pretty well locked in. Got some time sharing there at the bottom of page one. And then things look pretty tight on page two. Not a lot of wiggle room, and it's all upward testing, not downward. And then what's really interesting, and I'm not sure what to think about it, it's locked in, bunch of upward testing all in a row, then a few more that are locked in, but then a bunch of all downward testing in a row. I mean, Lee, any ideas come to mind on why it might be doing that?
I think if you go back up to the top, you see that one that was in position 9 was only there once. The one time that it appears there, it would bump everything else down. And the same thing with, some of the others. I mean, you're pretty locked in right there. Everybody's
that's
getting
true
their 20s. And then you've got like a couple more here that are, bumping things out. So, if it took that one in position 9 and threw it, I don't know, somewhere further down the thing, it could bump some things up and some things down.
You're right. So this may actually be a lot more locked in all the way down to number 70. So
Right. I tend to
page.
look. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say I tend to look at the width of those ranges. So even though they're moving up and down a little bit, they're only like a couple of position movements, which means that SERP looks to me like it's fairly dialed in. The movement likely is coming from inserting a URL or pulling a URL out. It's not true volatility, all over the place.
Yeah. So that's a good read. So it looks fairly locked in all the way to 70, and then it looks like you get some opportunities to break in for the bottom part of the top 100. So yeah, that could represent just a whole lot of
Dialed in.
dialed in pages. And that kind of makes sense. The local SEOs, they tend to have their formulas that work and they hit them pretty hard. And so that might be what we're seeing here is a keyword that people invest in SEO for.
Mm-hmm. I mean, really, you just have that one that is, got any range in it at all. It's down like in the 40s there, right? Nope, back up.
This one, the upward one.
Yeah, that one is the only one that showed, sort of a wide range of any sort, and it went from 36 to 25.
Yeah, and he's making a move. So again, if I was, ranking in between those values, I might want to look at their page and see what they're doing to get that upward testing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next keyword is make money online. And again, pretty narrow spreads. But then, around, page 4 in the Google search, it starts to open up. But these have some pretty meaty domains here, so there still might be quite a bit of competition, even though there's a lot of variance happening. Because what there's not in this midsection is a lot of time sharing, and there's a little bit, but like this whole run from 71 to 92, there's not a lot of time sharing there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that reminds me a lot of yoga pants.
Yeah, look at it. You might be able to, if you had a really good domain and a really good page, you might be able to pop in around that 40 mark, but then it's going to be a challenge from there forward.
Yeah, like I feel inspired that, a blog and, some longer domains are getting in there. But it's, there's a few domains in there pretty noteworthy, and they're not even ranking well. So yeah, that one looks a bit tougher to me. All right, here's another one. Composite bonding, and Stratford upon Avon is a location. So another local one. And yeah, it's very dialed in. But, around page 5, it starts opening up, and it looks like Google doesn't like a lot of the page 5 plus content. So this is one that, you could probably rank up to page 5 before it gets really hard. And look at that time sharing right there. That's page 4. Ton of time sharing on page 4. So yeah, you might be able to rank up to page 4 before it starts getting difficult. Okay, SEO Los Angeles, dialed in. And so, yeah, page 1 and page 2 are kind of spoken for, so tough competition there. But it looks like it opens up pretty quickly and a lot of downward testing. So, I'd imagine, if you were doing aggressive SEO, that, yeah, you'd probably get into page 4. If you did a decent job, you'd probably get into page 4. But then it would become serious SEO beyond that. It would be a battle of inches. How to start a blog is the next keyword. And wow, that definitely opened up on page 4. Yeah, and it starts to get serious on page 3 and above. And then the final keyword before we have our closing discussion is recruitment agency. And this is a short tail one. I would have figured that this one would have looked like other difficult keywords, but time sharing all the way to the top. I mean, you just never know. And there's time sharing all over this keyword. Google doesn't like any of these pages.
Hey, Ted.
Yep.
Looking at that keyword, I mean, could we also just be looking at people who don't know how to optimize?
It could be. Like, this could be what happens when there is no SEO being applied to web pages. Blind SEO, if you will. If that's what's happening, I mean, that could be, it's, even Yelp is time sharing. So it's something about this particular keyword and niche is baffling. But, that might be a good sign. That might mean that this keyword is easier than you would normally expect.
It looks like a synonym because if you look at some of the URLs, they're trying to rank for employment agency, things like that. And so recruitment agency, they might not have been tuned for.
And we looked at a keyword, was it executive search
Mm-hmm.
or executive recruitment?
Yeah.
It may be that these are the holdovers that didn't get the ranking for the other keyword.
Let's see, where was that one? Yeah,
Right
here's executive search again. And yeah, it too had a ton of time sharing.
So probably they just don't know. They don't know SEO. They just know how to recruit people. So.
Yeah, we may have just told the world about the underserviced SEO niche.
And Ted, I'm just curious, the SEO Los Angeles, even though Matt Cutts and John Mueller say they're the same, did you look at Los Angeles SEO?
I did not. I did just one, and I don't say they're the same.
I don't either, but I know John Mueller and Matt Cutts, they've always said you'll get the same results, even though you won't. But
yeah, you switch them around and you get different results in different orders, and sometimes the results aren't even the same between the two. Lee did a study on this, and he found that there was a pretty sizable difference.
Mm-hmm.
What was your recollection from that study, Lee?
I think, if you looked at the 100 URLs that would come from, Seattle Plumber and 100 URLs that would come from Plumber Seattle, if they were identical, you should have, when you netted them out, there should be 100. And I think there was 150 something, it was a fairly common number. If you had 3 that were supposed to be synonyms like Plumber Seattle, Plumbers Seattle, and Seattle Plumber, you'd have, instead of 100, you'd have 225 unique URLs. So, it got out of hand pretty quickly. You didn't have to search long to figure out that that was not at all true.
So there you have it. Seattle Plumber and Plumber Seattle, 2 different keywords. Let's see. Where were we? We were looking at that last one. So, how much can we take away from this, really? Like, it's interesting about being able to spot competitors making moves. Like, that's a cool feature of this. Looking at a keyword and estimating keyword difficulty based on the ranking probabilities, that's really cool. Understanding if the person you're trying to displace is ranking weakly, that's a cool concept. But really, probably the number one thing that you should take away from this whole episode and this technology is that you need to be careful when you say to a client, you rank number 24, because when we look at number 24, we go down there, who's in that spot, this one only appeared in search, 20% of the time. The one right above it, you might say you rank 24, but they might get the one time that it rank 19 and love you, or maybe the one time it ranked 32 and hate you. You know, and there's a lot of SEOs out there who told the client that, you know, hey, I got you to number 24. Client looks, it's at 57 and says you're fired. And so the thing you need to remember is these rankings, you know, they're not static, they're probabilities. And you should tell the client, you know, hey, I searched 10 times incognito and you were 24, you know, about 7 out of 10 times. And so they know that they might need to search multiple times to see what you're seeing. And they might need to search in a special way, incognito, from this location, you know, these types of conditions. Let's take a look, see if there's some questions. Ted, question: how can Google test results from page 5, 6, and 7 and beyond when only a tiny percentage of searchers will view that many pages from the SERPs? You're right. The test gets noisier and noisier when you get less traffic to test the results with. And that's probably why you see bigger and bigger swings as you go further down. They have to test higher up to get any kind of a reading at all. And so that's probably why we see that linear pattern where the variance gets wider as you get further down the list. And really, the only way they can do it is to test things up and down. And so if you're at number 50, they test you up at 25 and, you know, hey, does the click-through rate go up or does it stay the same? And even worse, you know, hey, he's at number 25. We tested him down at 50 and he got the same click-through rate. We can move him to 50 and it's no difference. You know, he gets just as much traffic to his site at 50 as he did at 25. That's terrible. So if you're running a click-through rate manipulation bot, make sure that you're not clicking on your downward tests. You might talk Google into moving you down.
The other thing that you got to consider is there's different types of tests. You know, if Google were going to test something like, I don't know, length of title, you know, as a factor, and they said, okay, let's get some long titles and move them up or move them down. On any single SERP, yeah, you're not going to see it. But across millions and millions of pages, you get statistical reliability. So we can see volatility here, but we can't see what it is that's driving that volatility, whether it's something they're testing, you know, across the ecosystem or within this, you know, single keyword cluster.
And Sam asks, what's the frequency of retrieval for these keywords? We are requesting them 20 times in under a minute and looking for the variation in ranking. Let's see. Had one person locally say IMG challenge rank for yoga pants. It would be funny to make a yoga pants contest, but I think we'd be picking our winner out in, you know, 247. It would be a funny one at least. Let's see. Terry's making fun of me, saying to this day, Ted still wears yoga pants. Let's see. Yoga pants is the new rhinoplasty plano. That would be a hard contest for sure. Rhinoplasty plano is the most famous SEO contest that ever happened. If you haven't heard about it, you should Google it. You're bound to find some articles on it. Our own Kyle Roof kind of won that by a landslide, but a few days late. We can see if there are changes. Can we see if there are changes to those pages, or are those pages static regardless of content? You know, there's going to be some of that. Some of this volatility is Google A/B testing the snippet. We've seen that already. We've identified that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to combine this technology with change detection on the page and have that data as well somehow presented, so we can say, oh, it's volatile without changes or volatile with changes. And so if you are making a next generation alien technology rank tracker, it should do ranking probability tracker and change detection. That would be amazing. Let's see. They may also be constantly adding job listings, so the content and keyword stuffing values are constantly on the move. Yeah, there could be natural reasons for volatility like that. Like if your homepage is only your summaries of your 5 most recent posts and you post 12 times a day, yeah, your rankings for the homepage are probably going to be all over the place. So that's all the questions we have. So that's our show for this time around. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't. Any final thoughts, Lee, on ranking probabilities? How do you feel about them after seeing so many, all at once?
We've been talking about volatility all the time. The question is not, does it exist? It's like, is it more volatile sometimes than others? Like, it'd be great to do this sort of, you've got a set of keywords now that we can run during an update, 3 months from now, to see what's changed, in terms of the overall volatility for certain keywords and, over the ecosystem as well. So, I think that's an important thing for people to understand, that you're doing it 20 times within a minute. So that means you're going to see 20 different SERPs, none of which might be the actual algorithmic rankings. It just could be just different test presentations that we're looking at.
Yeah. Full disclosure, we don't understand everything we're measuring. We're making models, we're making theories, we're trying to predict things. So this is an insight into some of that work that we do as SEO testers. You have to measure and you have to try to understand, and then you get a theory and you go out and test it, and maybe it moves the data the way you want, maybe it doesn't. But that's living the life, that's being in SEO. So thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks.